Well, hello, folks. It is 4 p.m. here in Arizona. I'm going to mute my notifications and we're going to get started with this in a second. I'm going to let people come in. I see some familiar faces in here. I see Texas Arch Drone Guy. I see Michael, Mr. B. I see Drone Pilot Contractors, Independent Drone Channel, all people that I see all the time making comments in our videos. So thank you for joining. We're going to do this good old Q&A or Ask Greg Anything. We did that a couple months ago now. Time has flown by. We want to do these every 2 weeks, actually, to give you a chance to, well, ask you questions about anything drone related. Last time we did this, I talked for an hour nonstop answering your questions, and that was awesome. So we'll be doing that some more. We actually almost forgot about this because we got an exciting package today from someone, from a drone manufacturer, and we'll be putting out content tomorrow about it. So you'll see, but it got us a little sidetrack. But we are here, and we're pretty excited. Somebody I see in the comments says when. I'll be answering the questions in a second here. We actually have a team in the back making sure that we don't miss any of the questions this time, because last time I spent a lot of time trying to dig around all the questions. But let's get started, I guess. We have Maddie. What's up, Maddie? Good to see you here. And all right, well, let's get to it. So the first question, Independent Drone Channel, he's asking, is there any assistance for UAV operators with disabilities who are trying to pass their Part 107? That is a great question, actually. And yes, the answer is yes. There are some things that you can do with PSI. Now, PSI is the company that does the testing on behalf of the FAA. They have a page. Actually, I'm going to put a link down to this document. I'm pretty sure it's a PDF. So you should be able to see it. So here, if you look in the comment, there's going to be a link. You're going to have to fill this out. You're going to have to give it back to them. They can provide you a few things. They can provide you with a reader, a person that's going to read the question. Now, these people are not knowledgeable about aviation at all. So they're just going to read the question. They're not going to give you any hints. You can get extended testing time according to this PDF. You can get what's called a reduced distraction environment. Now, I'm not going to lie, every single thing in there should be a distraction-free environment when you take the test, but I don't know what else they do differently. And then there's another one that says special accommodation. So I don't know what you need specifically, Independent Drone Channel, but this should be a pretty good start here for asking for something different. All right, we'll get to the next one. Drone Pilot Contractors asking, is there a way for a search and rescue team to get a waiver for flying in wilderness areas? So wilderness areas are not controlled by the FAA unless there is airspace on top of it, which is, I think, a different story. Wilderness areas are controlled by the Department of Wildlife, something, something. They're going to be the ones that put the restriction on land use. So you have to go talk to whoever is in charge of that specific wilderness area and see what you can do with them. The limitation is not really by the FAA; it's by the Park Service or whoever is in charge of that specific section. So go talk to them and see what you can do. For search and rescue purposes, I'm sure if they gave you a map, I mean, think about wilderness areas. They're set up to make sure wilderness is, doing their thing quietly. So if you know where they are and if there's birds or whatever it is, then you can get around it. Then I'm sure they'll be okay with it. Okay. Next question, Michael Holland. I know September 16 is the day that remote ID goes into effect. How will the FAA and general people keep track and of who does and who doesn't have it? That's a good question, Michael. The short answer is, how am I going to say that? I wouldn't be too worried about September 16 at the moment and the FAA finding out if you have remote ID or if you don't. Obviously, the FAA is not going to have people going around and checking if you have remote ID. That's not what they do. If something happens and you're not broadcasting remote ID and they find out, then it's going to be a different story. If you're flying near an event and they have stuff in place where they're checking for people, and then if they catch you and they find out you don't have remote ID, then you're going to be in trouble. Otherwise, I'm going to say I'm not going to worry too much about that. We're going to comply because we have to, because it's the regulation. But just keep that in mind. It's not something that the FAA is just going to go out there and send 70,000 people to go look for pilots. Okay, next question, JR. What is a good drone for a beginner? That's a great question. Um, this might not be always a popular opinion, but a good drone, I think, is going to be a GPS drone to get started. Um, Starting with a very cheap drone that doesn't have GPS is going to mean that you're likely going to crash the drone. Some people say, well, you got to learn with something that doesn't have GPS so you can build your skills. Yes and no. I have to disagree with that. I think you can go from a GPS drone, understand how the controls work, having attitude control at the very least, to make sure that the aircraft doesn't just wobble left and right. If it doesn't get pushed around by the wind, I think it's also a kind of a best thing to get started. And then you can upgrade or downgrade, whichever way you want to look at it, to a drone that doesn't have GPS, where you can learn a little bit more once you have the basis. So, what is a good beginner drone? It depends on your budget, but I'm going to say DJI Mini. You can find them used for very cheap. They have all the technology that you need to get started. Even the Mini 2, they might be a little bit more expensive, but quite frankly, the DJI brand is reliable and it flies really well. So anything that you can find used that's going to be in your price range that has GPS of the big manufacturers is going to be a good thing. Okay, next. I see the questions are piling up. 3 months after I purchased my Air 2, DJI added the Air 2S. Yep, the 2S has remote ID. Is there any chance that the Air 2 will or will become a brick? Two-part question. The first part is, will it have remote ID? I don't know. Is it possible that it will have remote ID? Yes. It all depends on if DJI wants to send it to the FAA or not for approval. Will it become a brick? No, absolutely not. You will be able to comply with remote ID by using a module, regardless of what drone you have. Even if you have a Phantom 1, you'll still be able to fly it as long as you have a module on top of it. That's a remote ID module. That's what I mean by that. So people ask me, I know it's not the question, but people say, is there a specific remote ID module that you recommend at the moment? No, we haven't tested all of them. As a matter of fact, we've only tested one. I'd like to test a few more. September is still pretty far around the corner, so I would say more in the July, August timeframe. We'll have a review of more of them, but for right now, I think it's too early. So. All right, next question, John Potter. I received my remote pilot certificate on January 19th, 2021. I just finished a remote pilot recurrent training online after seeing your recent weekly news update. I'm glad that worked. I assume that this is required every 2 years. That is correct. To be more precise, it's required every 24 calendar months, which means that in your case, you were good until the end of January 31st of 2021. That's what a calendar month is. And of 2023, I'm sorry, January 21st, 31st of 2023. So if you took it this month, which I'm assuming in April of 2023, then you are good until the end of April of 2025 in your case. So you add 2 years, you add 24 months, and then you go to the end of the month. That's how you find calendar months. And yes, it is free for those of you that missed on this. A lot of people took their recurrent training with the FAA in April of 2 years ago. And now you have to do it again if you did this. So I was one of them. I haven't done mine yet. I've got 7 more days, but it's in my calendar. So I'll get to it very shortly. Okay. Michael Ross is saying, I have this message and I need help with the test for Part 107. Will they give you assistance? And what happens if I fail? My son has cerebral palsy and he was thinking of getting a Part 107. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the question is, actually. I need help with the Part 107. So they'll give you assistance. They'll give you assistance to the extent of what I said earlier, which is they will read the questions to you if that's something that can help you, or give you a little bit more time to finish. Andy Gatt says, in regards to flying over 400 feet in certain situation over a structure, how tall does the structure need to be before it's no longer considered ground level? So, Andy, in this case, let's say that you have a structure right here. You can go, if you're within 400 feet, and if you're operating under Part 107, this is key. You have to be operating under Part 107. If you're operating under Part 107 and you are within 400 feet of a man-made structure, then you can go as high as 400 feet above that structure, as long as you stay within 400 feet radius. So you can only do that if you don't start in controlled airspace. So if you're near an airport, let's say in class Delta airspace, this rule doesn't apply. If you are getting into airspace that requires authorization, so if doing this takes you into class Bravo airspace or class Charlie airspace, for example, you can't do it because you would need authorization to get in that airspace. So I think that I hope that answers your question, but that's always a bit confusing for people. Malenki says, recently got Lance to fly 400 feet over a park, sent to DJI to unlock. I took off from trail, but the cliff I was next to was 500 feet tall. Yep. How do I get authorization for 400 feet and 900 feet above the takeoff point? This is a tough one. This is a tough one. This is something that we're faced with where we live as well, which is that if there is a cliff that's higher than 400 feet tall, you technically cannot get to the top of that. It would have to be 400 feet or less, technically. A cliff is not a man-made structure, so it's not considered as a structure. I know it doesn't make sense. I wish the FAA had thought about this a little bit better, but there aren't many 500-foot cliff in Washington, so I think a lot of the lawmakers have never seen those. But in your case, you'd have to find a way to maybe go around somehow to be able to get to the top. Maybe there's a bit of a slope to get to it. If it's a straight cliff like a canyon, then it's going to be difficult. I'm going to say this, and I don't say this very often, but if you're close enough to the cliff, I really don't see why you couldn't just climb to be on top of that cliff as long as you can see around and have airspace awareness, and as long as you have airspace authorization. Now, you wouldn't need to have authorization authorization to fly 900 feet above the takeoff point because you have approval to fly 400 feet above the ground at all time, unless you're in controlled airspace. So in your case, you probably can do it safely. I hate to say it because it's technically against the rules, but I think this is where you use your common sense to make it happen and make it safely. The DJI unlock. Oh, good. I didn't see that. Yeah, Ethan just mentioned that maybe he's asking for DJI unlock. So to tell DJI to unlock, you should be able to fly 900 feet. I think DJI doesn't restrict you until 1600 feet without an authorization, but he got Lance. Oh, this is confusing. Huh. Yeah, I would just explain to DJI in this case. I think it's going to have to be a manual unlock to do that. That's interesting. I've never been faced with this. Yeah, this is a good one. I'm not quite sure. I would say just request it to DJI and tell them. Um, hmm, interesting. They'll unlock anything. You're right. They will. Okay, next one. With drones as first responder, DFR, controlling a drone from a dispatch center, do you need to have a visual observer that can actually see the drone during the entire flight? So that's a great question. Flying 7 drone service. It depends on what the FAA has approved. So our friends at in Pearland, Texas, with in in Texas with Brendan Carr, they have been able to get approval to do this without visual observers. There are other people other agencies that are approved to do this, but they do need to have a visual observer. Some of them also have visual observers that are the officers on the ground. I think Divi from Paladin has that kind of approval. So you'll have to. It really depends. It depends on what the FAA approved and what the agency actually submitted. So not an easy answer here. Will there be an app to track drones in the air for the public to view? Yes, there will be an app. We've tested one, and now I cannot remember the name of it. Drone something. Let me find it. Yeah, Jason would know. Jason is on a cruise ship right now to the Bahamas while we're here slaving. Um, no, it's not drone map. It's crap. I'm sure somebody will leave it in the comments. I can't remember what it is, and I might have deleted it because it doesn't work on Apple. Okay, so to get back to this, it's made by Drone Tag, and the app currently only works on Android phones because Apple has not unleashed the ability for phones to actually scan the area for remote ID information. So, with that being said, that's going to be the app at this stage, but it hasn't really worked well for us. I think we've been able to see a couple of them using Android phones, but not all of our drones are apparently broadcasting at the moment. And if they are, it's not broadcasting really well. Drone Tag, thank you. Somebody put that in there. So Drone Tag app, good. Download it and try it, but it definitely doesn't work um, for Apple devices right now. Sorry, I'm getting dry. All right, next question. Are uncategorized drones with a drone tag remote ID allowed to transition over people? It's a great question. I'll get to that in a second. And the answer is no. Remote ID doesn't really have, well, the fact that your drone is remote ID compliant doesn't mean that it's allowed to fly over people. You need to have a categorized drone in order to fly over people. I'm going to say that again. You need to have a categorized drone in order to fly over people. Category 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you have remote ID, it's a good bonus because if you have a categorized drone and you have remote ID, it will allow you to fly over large amount of people. Okay. The FAA calls it open air assembly, but the fact that you just have a single remote ID drone does not allow you to do that. So that's the short answer to that. Next question. Jeff is asking, is there an app you can download to see drone traffic in our area? I think I just answered that. The answer is yes, called Drone Tag. I'm a Part 107 student who just bought a Mini 3 Pro. I want to register with the FAA. If I register as a recreational drone pilot, can I change it later to 107? That's a great question. And the answer is yes, but I'm going to give you a tip. When you register your drone right now, go ahead and register it under Part 107. And you're going to say, but Greg, I'm not Part 107 certified yet. And I'm going to say, yes, that's okay. Because technically, your registration is a registration. It's a Part 47 registration with the FAA, and it's technically valid under both of them. The only difference is that if you register for recreational purposes, then you have one number that you're going to put on all your drones. It's $5 for one number, and it's for all the drones. When you do it under Part 107, you have to register each drone individually. So if you do it under Part 107 right now and you do it again the next time when you get a new drone, then you're still going to be compliant because your aircraft is still registered. Okay. And I know this might be a bit of confusing, but if you read the regulation completely, you will see that it's all under the same part. It's all the same type of registration. So just do it under Part 107 right now. Next question. Can the MLB, Major League Baseball, hold the drone pilot responsible along with the FAA fines for flying during a baseball game? It's a great question. And I'm going to say the only thing that they can do is, well, you think about that for a second. They don't control the airspace. They could hold you accountable for trespassing if you were on the property flying your drone, which is something that they prohibit. Now, I'm guessing they would have to go through the courts in order to sue you for trespassing if they decided to do so. But yes, they could take action for you being there doing this, and obviously probably even creating a distraction during the game if you were caught doing that. The bottom line is, don't be that guy, right? Don't fly where you're not supposed to fly, especially during these games. It's just stressful for everyone, and it just gives ideas to bad people. All right, next question. Actually, getting caught up pretty quickly today. Thanks for all that you and the Pilot Institute staff do for the US community. You're very welcome. In which way is AI changing job work for commercial drone pilots, and what are the specific ways to benefit from these innovations? That is a great question. So, um, AI is an interesting thing, right? Right now, AI doesn't fly drones. I said right now because the FAA doesn't have really a pathway to do this. But I can absolutely foresee a time when AI will be sending commands to a drone to fly and to complete missions on the behalf of a company. And the pilot will be out of the picture. Now, how long is it going to be? Uh, probably a long time just because of what the FAA has in place with regulation, and it would have to be changed, and the FAA would have to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to be doing this. Autonomous flights, which is really what this would be, I think is a long ways away in the sense. Long ways, not like 20 years, but at least a few years, I think, before the FAA is comfortable with it. So that's one side of AI. Now, how can you use it for yourself as a pilot? I think there's a lot of ways that you can use it for yourself as a pilot. I would get started with a pre-flight briefing, for example. I love the idea of having an automated briefing for the area where you're going to fly, where AI could be, if you're familiar with ChatGPT, you can go in ChatGPT and ask it to give you a pre-flight briefing for a specific section, giving you what the winds are at different altitudes, and it would collect all that data. So I foresee AI as being helpful for small businesses that want to help create ads for their business, for example, to go online. Now, we don't use AI for the ads. We still do all that manually, but I've seen people do it to help create images, to maybe even help modify some images over time. So I think there's going to be a lot of ways that people can use AI in the future with their businesses. I don't foresee AI taking the job of a drone pilot away, but I see it as possibly an assistant that you can use on a regular basis for your flights. Even eventually asking it questions about FAA regulation. Can I fly here? Or do I need airspace authorization to fly here? I don't know that it works at the moment because the AI data in ChatGPT is 2 years old. So a lot of things have changed in the last 2 years with the FAA. We've actually been able to trick it with regulation because of the changes that happened in April 2021. That are still not in there. So I would hold off for a bit, but eventually I think all this will be updated. So I can go for a long time about AI because I think it's a fascinating topic, but we'll see where it goes. Next question. Michael says, are my drones legal for me to use? One is 127 grams, one is 69 grams if I took the trust test. Michael, yes, that would be legal. You don't need to register these drones if you're flying for recreational purposes. I'm guessing that's all you're going to do. You talked about trust. So you still need to get airspace approval if you're going to fly in a specific areas. You still need to keep it within line of sight. You still need to follow all the rules. The only thing that you don't have to do is register the drone. And I need to be clear on this because students ask all the time, I have a 250, sub 250 gram drone. I can fly wherever I want. I don't need airspace authorization. That is incorrect. You absolutely need to have follow all the rules except the registration one. That's the only thing that sub 250 gives you. Next question. Roseanne says, can you talk about the documentation every 107 pilot should have on hand for both a commercial mission, recreational flying, in the event that you're ramp checked by the FAA? That's a great question. First thing is an ID, right? You also need to have your pilot certificate, which would be your Part 107 remote pilot certificate. If you're operating under Part 107, I'm going to start with Part 107. And then any kind of currency approval. If you Ethan over there is playing the drums in the background. You need to have your you need to have currency proof or proof of currency, which means if you did your test more than 2 years ago, you need to have the FAA documentation, so ALC 677 with you. You should have your registration certificate with you available. Now, I have to say the only thing that you need to have really physical is your pilot certificate and your ID. Everything else can be a PDF, but so you should have your registration certificate as well. You definitely need to have the matching number on the drone with it. And then you need to have anything that will go along with the approval that you may need in that airspace to fly. So if you're flying in Lance airspace, you get a text message or an email from Lance telling you that you've been approved. You should have access to that. And then maybe a waiver if you're operating with a waiver. So all these things you need to add to that list, but that's the basic current thing. Now, if you're flying under recreational purposes, then that's a little bit different. You can fly under Part 107 recreationally. I know a lot of this is confusing to people, but I have never done a single flight in my life under recreational rules. I'm going to say that again. I've never done a single flight in my life under recreational rules because all my flights are conducted under Part 107. Even if I go to the park to fly with my kids, I still fly under Part 107 rules, and this is all recreational stuff. Recreational rules 44809 is just a subset of Part 107 that gives you slightly different rules, but you don't have to follow these to fly recreationally. You can do that under 107. So, but if you're flying solely under USC 44809, then you need to have your trust certificate, a copy of that, doesn't have to be paper. You need to have registration if your drone requires it. And then I don't think you need to have a form of ID, but I would just have one, just so they know who is attached to the trust certificate. And then you need to have a copy of your CBO guidelines, and that's important. So I would have a PDF available. Most cops that are going to stop you or ask you questions don't know about CBO guidelines, but if you want to impress them, you can give it to them. The FAA may or may not know about CBO guidelines. I hate to say it that way, but um, give them your CBO guidelines so they know what you're following, and that's it really for USC 44809. Okay, I think that answers the question right here. By the way, in your question, Roseanne, you said FAA agents, police, or others. The only people that you have to show that documentation to is FAA, police, or the TSA. That's the only people that can ask you credentials. Anybody else can ask the police to ask you for your credentials. Uh, all right, next question. Construction mapping to automated machine control would make construction 100% automated. Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Okay, next thing. SUTV is asking, Greg, I have my part 107. Thank you. You're very welcome. My friend owns and lives next to the river and state park land. I launch from the house with permission. Can I fly in the sky over the river and into same park land? Yes, the short answer is yes, you can. I'm going to add a little caveat to that. To state park is fine. I would the reason I hesitated, I would not do this into a national park just because national parks are set up for specific reasons. But state park, probably not a whole lot of wildlife to protect because of a state park, although I may be wrong. Just be careful what you fly over is what I'm getting to. You don't want to disturb birds or whatever that are nesting in a specific area. So, but from an FAA perspective, yes, if the airspace is open, you could fly over into a state park as long as you maintain visual line of sight. You don't fly over people, people in moving vehicles, blah blah blah. Follow all the rules, then you could do it. The restriction is a land restriction in this case. Okay, Jeff Moreland is asking, can you please talk about the difference in flying over an open air assembly sporting event compared to flying outside the property, but still able to see inside, but not directly over people? That's a great question. So, in order to fly, I think I said this earlier, but I'm going to say it again. In order to fly over open air assembly, you need to have a drone equipped with a categorized drone and to have remote ID on the drone that's functioning. So that would be allowing you to fly over open air assembly. And I'm saying categorized drone, you need a category 1 or a category 2, and that's it. Category 3 cannot fly over open air assembly, and neither can category 4. So if you don't have any of that equipment, then you need to fly outside of all this, but not directly over people. So if you're not flying directly over people, there's not as many limitations. You can do that with any drones. And that would be my recommendation personally. Even if I was allowed, even with a categorized drone, I would be pretty reluctant to want to fly my drone over a large crowd for a lot of reasons. Reason number one is that there's a lot of people, which means that there's always going to be one person that's going to want to throw something at the drone and take it down. Okay. That's that's just the nature of large groups of people that are watching a sporting event or whatever it is. Reason number two, it's a lot of liability because even if you have a categorized drone, it can still go down and it can still hit someone and you can still get sued and it can still be very expensive. So most of the time, I've never really seen a big need for doing that. I can do the same effect by using a zoom lens, using a 7x on a Mavic 3, or using a 50 millimeter on an Inspire 2 or whatever it is, just to get that effect where you're flying almost over people. We did a video a couple maybe a year ago or so called "Can you spot these 5 illegal flights?" And what we did is we recorded the footage in such a way that it looks like the flight was illegal, and it wasn't. And so we took the Inspire 2 with the 50 millimeter lens on it, and we flew from a distance, and it looked like we were flying over a whole bunch of people, and we were never anywhere close to it. So you can get that same exact effect without having to do it and without the liability. So that would be my preference personally. What parks are you not allowed to fly into? Really, none, quite frankly. Because, well, no, actually, I'll take that back. Okay, most national parks, most state parks don't have big restrictions over them unless they're close to an airport and there's airspace restriction there. The Grand Canyon is the only exception. The FAA has a massive restriction for flying over the Grand Canyon for manned and unmanned aircraft. So you definitely cannot fly from a distance into the Grand Canyon Park just because of FAA regulation, in this case, not just land restriction. Now, you cannot take off from inside the park also because of land restriction. So the national park, the Grand Canyon National Park is a double whammy in this case. Hard question, probably better for the FAA. Would the FAA still require an authorization in my Class C airspace while inside my house? That's a great question. For real estate photography and multi-story home, it is helpful to use a drone at times. So the short answer, Max, to this is that the FAA does not control what happens inside of houses. And so you can fly your drone at will, even if it's in Class Bravo airspace right next to the runway. The only people that might have something to say about this is DJI if you're flying a DJI drone, because they might restrict you thinking that you are outside about to fly, but you can get approval for that. I'll give you an example. We did a deep dive recently for a Cessna 172, and we flew inside of a small hangar alongside the runway in a Class Delta airspace. And I knew it was going to happen, so I requested approval from DJI to do it. And then we got approval. We flew inside. We were right next to the runway, and of course, never was an issue. We were never really at risk in this case. Okay, next question is, what are some ways to deal with confrontation with people who approach you while you are flying? I should let Don answer that one because he had a good one a couple of weeks ago. Don is filtering through the comments right now, shaking his head. The best way to do it is to keep calm. We've had people come to us when we were filming, and surprisingly, now that we have more people when we're on set, we get fewer and fewer people coming to talk to us. It happened mostly to me when I was filming by myself when I started the company, because I had all this equipment. Most of the time, friendly people just wanting to learn about drones, and but a couple times not so friendly. So always keep it calm. Try to tone down the situation. Don was threatened with that guy to come back and shoot him with a shotgun. Is that with a shotgun? Yeah, with a shotgun. He was flying with somebody else. They were both flying FPV, and he was spotting somebody else flying FPV to make sure that they were safe, and he could take over the controls if something happened. And this guy just came over and just started insulting them and asking them what they were doing. I'm not going to say the words that they used to describe them, but not PG-13. But Don did the right thing. He basically said, we're going to pack and we're just going to go further away and go away from that guy. But he was insistent. He just really wanted to have a fight. So I would say just be careful. You never know what other people have, if they have a gun, if they have whatever. Sometimes it's easier to let your ego get out of the way and just step away. Sometimes you have confrontation with police, or I would say local enforcement that are not the police, that don't have really any kind of power, but have a lot of that power getting to their head because they think that they can do whatever they want. So they can't take your stuff away. They can't just confiscate. They can't really even ask for your credentials technically. But at one point you also got to think, is this worth it? Sometimes you just want to talk to them and say, hey, listen, I'm okay to be here. Feel free to call the police. I would absolutely say, let's go ahead and call the police and let them deal with this. That way you don't have to get involved. The cops get here and you can talk to them calmly. They can go talk to the other party and you don't have to get involved. I know it's hard sometimes because you're in the right and you really need to get the job done. Sometimes it's an angry neighbor that's next door and you're filming somebody else's property for a video shoot, maybe you can go next door and just basically give them um, like a pamphlet that says, "Hey, we're going to be here flying tomorrow. Just if you have any question." I know it's not always easy to do this, but so yeah, um, it's not it's not an easy situation. Um, yeah, it looks like the feed might be a little bit glitchy, so apologies for that. It looks fine on our side, but hopefully it gets better. I'm not sure what's happening here. Okay, good question. I know the next one here is going to take a while. Can we discuss remote ID and Frias or Frias, whatever you want to call them? Many CBOs haven't requested Frias. We don't have Frias locations. Uh, we don't know yet that CBOs haven't requested Frias. I think the ones that I've talked to have actually tried to put paperwork in. I know it's going to take the FAA a while to approve these Frias because it's the first time. Now, hopefully, over time, it will get easier. But at the moment, I think we have to get patient. Um, the FRIAs, for those of you that don't know, FAA, crap, I can't remember what it stands for. FAA Restricted Identification Area. So the FRIAs are going to be areas where you don't need to have remote ID to fly your drone. Now, a lot of people see this as kind of like the answer to remote ID for those that don't want to use remote ID. I'm going to say not necessarily, because I think these FRIAs will be places where people don't want to necessarily fly because they're not going to be where there's a big landscape or things that you want to film. It's going to be a great place to practice your skills, but that's about it. I think that's my personal opinion. So we'll see, but I think we'll see more CBOs getting approved over time. The FAA has to approve. I think a lot of CBOs are testing the boundaries to make sure that they can get approval in those specific areas. So we'll see. We'll see what comes out of it. All right, next question. My last question doesn't have to be your last question. My last question was not about state park, but a national park. Oh, national park. Okay. Can I launch from a private property and fly in the airspace on national park as long as I follow all the rules? And yes, the answer is still yes. In this case, you can, unless it's the Grand Canyon, in which case you cannot. Because so look for the airspace. If the airspace is clear, then go for it. Maintain visual line of sight. Don't go bother wildlife, and then you'll be good. Lon Dennard is asking, how do you maintain such a youthful image at your advanced age? I don't know. That's a question I get a lot. At 65 years old, I have seen a lot of stuff. But yeah, I run. I eat well. I don't. I eat well. I had pizza for lunch. Is that the answer? Drink a lot of rum. I think that might be the answer. Dunkers. Yeah, we eat a lot of Dunkers from Trader Joe's in the office. So that was a good question. FA recognize identification area. I should know that better. Um, all right. Is that the end of it? No, it's not the end of it. Okay, there you go. Why is it so hard to find a CBO? That's a good question. Uh, hope the FAA is watching. It's because of the FAA. Because the FAA has made it really difficult to become a CBO, I think, based on the feedback that we've heard from other CBOs. Oh, Dunkers. Ben is bringing me Dunkers. See, this is what keeps you young right here. A whole box of Dunkers. $4.99 at Trader Joe's. I'm not affiliated. uh, why is it so hard to find a CBO? Really, I think because it is difficult to go through the paperwork and the process to get approved as a CBO. There's only 4 CBOs. I haven't looked in the last month or so, but I think there's still only 4 CBOs approved at this stage. And but they're all doing a great job. So do we need more CBOs? I don't know that we need much more. We have one for kind of all the different types of flying available out there. I recommend you go take a look at our friends at Flight Test. They're an improved CBO, and then the FPV Freedom Coalition. Both of them do a great job. As a matter of fact, STEM Plus C is also doing a great job on the STEM side. So if you're more on the STEM side, they were approved. The last approval was STEM C Plus, STEM C Plus. So go take a look at them as well. But yeah, it's a difficult situation. And I know some people have asked me before, why is Pilot Institute not a CBO? The short answer is we don't qualify because we're not a non-for-profit. We are a for-profit organization. company. So we don't qualify for that. We would have to create a non-for-profit, which is complicated, more staff. It's difficult. Instead, we're working with the CBOs that are existing right now, making sure that they continue doing a great job. And I think that's all we can do at this stage. Ben is asking, I'm interested in mapping. What is the cheapest software for this? There are free software available, actually. But since we're here talking, I just got a text message from one of my FA contact, and he says the FA is watching. That is funny. What is the cheapest software available? There is free software available for mapping. I would actually recommend, I don't usually plug our products during these events, but we do have mapping courses. We have 3 of them taught by Jared Janisek, who's amazing. He does this for a living. So I would say go take a look at this. Even if you, Ben, if you take just the first mapping course, we have 3 of them, just to see if this is something for you, and we'll show you how to do all that software stuff and give you some ideas of what software to use. So, okay, next question is, that was funny from the FA. And I'm sure he'll agree with me. What's the best way to get into making being a drone pilot your full-time job? It's a good question. And to be successful for years to come. Just wondering if there is any websites or anything out there for drone jobs. This is a question we get a lot, actually. I'm going to say, if you want to do this full time, you have to have some entrepreneurial bones in your body. You got to be willing to take a risk of actually creating a business and then going at it. Using somebody else's drone jobs is more than likely not going to allow you to live full time on that. So I would recommend that you start part time. Maybe a lot of people do that and become successful. Actually, one of our employees recently asked me to go part time because he was getting busier and busier with things that he did on the side. So now he's doing still part time, but he's getting a lot busier and building his business on the side. So I would say do that. We do have a course for that as well. Again, I hate pitching the course, but I really like that course because it's a no BS kind of course where I'm going to give you tips on how to create a business plan. And I think a lot of people fail at business because they've never created a business plan. They've never researched past just having an idea in their head. And it's so important that you do that. And the reason I know this is because I did this myself, not with the drone business, something unrelated to flying and to drones. And I didn't do enough research and the business wasn't successful. And I realized over time that this was why, because I should have done more research. And so, um, do this the right way. Do yourself a favor and do the research. Find the competition. Find the market that you're trying to go after. Find what product you're going to sell, how much you're going to sell it for. Make sure that it's enough to actually make money. Find how much this is going to cost you to run your business. There's a lot of questions that you need to answer. And in the course, actually, I have you do 27 different things, I think, to build that business plan. And it takes time. And a lot of people give up eventually on the business because they haven't done that homework. So I'll get off my soapbox, but if you want to do this full time, I think that's what you have to do. I'll add something to this. The drone is a way to capture data. It's a tool to capture data. The drone flying is not what pays the bills. The data is what pays the bills. The analyzing the data and providing a service to your clients, providing something that they can do themselves is what's going to pay the bills. So look at different ways that you can capture data. Look at the different types of data that you can capture with your drone. Data is just RGB pictures. It can be thermal imaging. It can be LiDAR. It can be inspections that you actually watch the pictures that you took and then tell the customer this needs to be replaced, this needs to be replaced. So all these things are added services. It's not just flying a drone. So just keep that in mind. Next question is, how long do typical drone last before the battery dies? That's going to range between, well, 3 or 4 minutes on some of the FPV drones that we have to 45 minutes on the Mavic 3 series, for example. These drones will fly for a very long time. So I would say on average, 20 to 30 minutes is probably a good thing. But yeah, that's typically that. Next question, which manufacturers make Category 1 and Category 2 drones? That is a trick question, Paul. Category 2 drones, there are at the moment 0 drones available out there. Category 1 drones, there are a few. What is a Category 1 drone? It doesn't have to be approved by the FAA, but it needs to meet some criteria, which are it needs to be less than 0.55 pounds or 250 grams with everything attached to it on takeoff. It needs to have no props that are creating laceration, which means more than likely prop guards on your drone, which means added weight. And that's it, really. So um, if you have a drone that has that, then it meets a requirement. We do have a drone here, which is a Mavic 2 Japanese version, which was slightly lighter. The actual frame, the actual bones of the aircraft is lighter than the actual Mini 2 made in the US and around the world. And it also comes with a smaller battery. So the total weight, instead of being 249 grams, it is actually 199 grams with everything together. If you put prop guards on top of it, then it puts it at 240, I think 249 gram exactly. We had to clip a couple pieces of plastic from that. And this is the drone right here. So we have it labeled DJI Mini 2 Japan. And on the side here, I don't know if you can read it, but if you can't, it says 199 grams. With this and the battery inside, the small battery from Japan, that has only one cell in it and gives you only about 5 minutes of flight time. This thing is a Category 1 drone. There are some drones that are FPV drones that are going to be sub 250 with prop guards. So there are some Category 1 drones available out there. Category 2 drones, none at the moment. There's one Category 3 drone that is approved, and that's a fixed wing from EB. And that's it. That's the only Category 3 drone approved. Okay. Thank you. You didn't hear my slurp. Okay, if you are in LA, or you're allowed to fly over Malibu Beach, or you have to get authorized. So, Jay, I'm going to say I don't know actually, but all I know is that California has some weird rules for drone flying, and I know that most public beaches are off limit. So, I would recommend. Actually, I'm going to leave a link in the comments here for you guys to follow. Um, if you go to wiki here, let's see if I can do this. If you go to this link right here, this will give you an idea of the place where you can fly and can't fly. And then we grouped actually a lot of different things into this as well. So yeah, take a look at that link. It will help you right here. Next question is, what are the consequences if someone shoots your drone down? I see Vic is in the comments. I've been reading the comments from a different place, but I see Vic is right here. Vic can tell you about the consequences to shooting a drone, which unfortunately at the moment is there are not a whole lot because the FBI is the branch that is supposed to be going after the people that shoot at aircraft, and they have refused to this time to go after people that shoot at drones. Even though drones are FAA registered aircraft, there hasn't been really a whole lot of willingness from that side of the government to go after people that shoot at drones. So yeah, it's frustrating to say the least, but yeah, it's frustrating. But we need to continue, by the way, I'm going to finish with this. We need to continue reporting these drones that are getting shot. Vic at Drone Service Provider Alliance is keeping a list, an ongoing list. So anytime we hear about drones getting shot at, we put them in touch with Vic, and then Vic keeps track of them and then talks to people about them. Let's put it this way. Mark says, I love your FA Part 107 made easy. Thank you. I'm 70% done, almost there. When do you recommend scheduling my test, and should I go through it twice? Through it twice also. Thank you for keeping it up to date, blah, blah, blah. Yep, you're very welcome. So I don't know about the comment of doing it twice. You only have to take the test once because you're going to pass on first try. And when should you schedule it? I would say you can schedule it when you score 2 exams over 80% consecutively without missing an exam in between and not over the same day. I know it's a lot of thing, but get 80% one day, do another test, get 80%. If you get those two, then you can schedule your test. It takes only a few days to get an exam schedule. So I wouldn't do it weeks ahead of time just because there's no reason to put pressure on yourself. So yeah, just take your time on that one. Are there other certificates for drone mapping and infrared camera use above and beyond Part 107? That's a great question, Paul. There is no mapping certificates available unless you want to become a surveyor, which is not required. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of years to become a surveyor. It obviously opens more doors to do this, but as far as infrared cameras, that's another great question. They are levels, um, not ASTM. Maybe it is ASTM. Anyway, there's a standard out there for level 1, level 2, and level 3 thermography. And you can find places that teach these and will give you some sort of a certificate. Although it's not an FAA certificate, it's more of a ASTM or standard certificate because their course follows a specific standard, but it is recognized by a lot of people. So if you say for example, I'm level 1 thermography, so I know how to use the camera, I know what it does, I've received the training. I'm not level 2 or level 3, which would give me more abilities to do more things and get a better knowledge of it. But it's not a requirement. It's highly recommended that you get some training before using infrared cameras and before writing reports for customers on how the data is collected, what the data tells you, because it's a complex subject. So same for drone mapping. There's not really any kind of certification, but it's good to know what you're talking about. So it's good to get trained on this stuff. Desi is asking, hey Desi, is asking what are some options for Lance apps if someone wants a choice? Quite frankly, I'm pretty biased with this because we've used the same app for a very long time, and we've used Aloft. Aloft has a new app called Air Control. It's an upgrade from the previous app, in the sense that it has an enterprise level as well that you can use, which is pretty useful. But I don't see a reason for not using Aloft. I think they do like 70 or 80% of all lens requests in the country now. They're pretty much the number one. It's free, it's reliable. I talk to the folks at Aloft on a regular basis. I have a great contact with them, and I know they're in this for the right reasons, which was not always the case with some previous providers. If you know who I'm talking about, I'm not going to mention their name. But yeah, I think you can't go wrong with using Aloft. So. All right. Are we getting to the bottom of this? 8 minutes to go. That's pretty cool. It's good timing. A few more questions. If you have more questions, put them in there. We'll be talking about this. Somebody's asking, aren't news stations replacing their helicopters with drones, or are they not effective enough to replace helicopters? Well, I think there's a need for both of them. I know Zach over there is a helicopter pilot. He's staring at me. Make sure I say the right answer. I think helicopters have a slightly different place for in the news media. I think there's a place for drones and there's a place for helicopters. Imagine a high speed chase along the highway. Helicopters sometimes get lost because they're not fast enough sometimes to follow the chase. So a drone is definitely not going to be able to do that. Drones are going to have limited flight time, which I know helicopters do too. But in some cases, you want to get closer to the action, and you don't want this massive helicopter flying over people or a scene or whatever it is. So drones are better in this case. I don't think they're going to replace one and the other. I think there's always going to be a place for it. But yeah, it is how it is. One more question here. Has a process been established for measuring the kinetic impact energy for category 1 through 4? And will parachutes be the solution? Lowell, that is a great question. That is a great question. So category 1s don't need to prove kinetic impact energy, only category 1 and 2. There is a method for doing that, which is called a means of compliance. So this is where we get into the weeds. The FAA put a two-step process in place for a drone to be approved as a categorized drone. First off, someone had to come up with a set of procedures in order to test drones to make sure they meet the requirements of category 2 and 3 in this case. And somebody did, a university, I can't remember the name of it now. And I think there's another company that has that too. It's called a means of compliance. So if you research the FAA website for MOC, means of compliance, you will see a list. And there might be more in here. I haven't been on there for several months. These companies, universities, agencies, whatever you want to call them, now have the ability to put a drone through the test. So let's say DJI wanted to hire that university that has approval. They would send them the drone and they would say, we'd like to get this drone compliant. Can you test it? Because you have the means of compliance. You have a way to test this drone for categories. And then they would put it through the test. So to this date, there's only been one drone that has been approved using means of compliance that were approved by the FAA to get a declaration of compliance approved by the FAA. So the FAA reviews the results, basically says, yep, this meets the requirements, we're okay with it, stamp of approval, go. Now, the second part of your question is, will parachutes be a solution? Yes and no. Interestingly, we talked to a parachute manufacturer a while back on the Pixel Drone Show, and they were telling us that even with parachutes, it doesn't the impact, the force of impact, doesn't necessarily meets the category requirements. So I thought that was really interesting. So I have people asking me, are we ever going to see categorized drone? Well, we've seen one. We see a couple category 1 as well. There's a category 3, a couple category 1. I think there's a lack of interest from drone manufacturers to want to go through the process to get approved for category drone, because I think they don't see the market for it. I don't know how many people would be willing to pay a lot of extra money to be able to fly over people. And I know a lot of you might say, oh, I'll pay for it, I'll pay for it. But think about the cost of doing all of this, and it has to be passed down to the customer. And that drone is only categorized in the United States. So somebody would have to do this just for the US market and put all that research and development just for the US market. So I think, and I hate to be pessimist because I'm usually not, but I don't think we're going to see that many drones that are category compliant. We'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong. Next question. Why does inches of mercury go down with less atmospheric pressure? How was the measurement created? So here's how it was measured. And this is a barometer. That's the principle of a barometer, right? And they put mercury in it. And on one side, imagine that you have a cup, okay? You have a cup and then a tube on the other side. And as the pressure, as there is more pressure of the air over the mercury would climb up onto this tube. And on the tube, there is graduation, there's little marks that tell us how many inches of mercury were up there. That's why we call it inches of mercury. So if you've ever seen an actual barometer, that's how they work. They're exposed on one side. You put pressure, air pressure on one side. So the more air pressure we have, the heavier the air is going to be, the more it's going to push on the mercury, the more it's going to push it on the other side to go up that tube that has markings. That's the easiest I can explain that. Next question. If I wanted to do search and rescue, do I need to have a different version of Part 107? Ronald, no, you do not. You can do all of that under Part 107. You have to follow all the Part 107 rules, but you can absolutely do that that way. And that's that. All right. Any more questions on here? I was told no matter what license you have, you cannot fly over people, even if they sign a waiver. Is that true? Yes, it is absolutely true. You can only fly over people. I'm going to say it one more time. You can only fly over people if you have a categorized drone. That's the only way to do it. Okay. You can try to get a waiver, but I can tell you right now, you're probably not going to get it. Is the Mavic Pro Platinum Remote ID compliant? Yes, actually, it is. Surprisingly, I don't know why. What are the procedures to be able to fly a drone in Canada? I have a guy that wants to map his island up in Canada to make a trail system. You will have to go on the Transport Canada website, which is the equivalent of the FAA. They have two different licenses. They have a standard license and they have an advanced license. The limitations are slightly different than the US. The limitations are risk-based rather than being type of activity based if you want. So it all depends on how close you're going to be to people, and there's a bunch of things. I would recommend looking into it. I want to say, I might be incorrect, but I want to say that it's harder to get as a non-Canadian citizen, but please take a look at that. Not my area of expertise, unfortunately. Somebody says, please keep this on your video list. It will certainly be very interesting and needed. Reminds me of Drone Safety Day. Yeah, we do Drone Safety Day every day at Pilot Institute. We were just talking about this. So National Drone Safety Day is April 29th, which is this weekend. Coming around the corner. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do because we do Drone Safety Day every day. This is our job. We help educate people and answer their question just like we did tonight. So we'll have to do something slightly different. Can you fly over people if you cross from point A to point B? Same answer as I gave before. In order to fly over people, you need to have a categorized drone. So at the moment, difficult to do. We're getting close to the end here. It's 5 o'clock. I don't want to keep people for too long. Any last questions? I don't see any right here. As always, if you're not subscribed, I don't ask for subscribers very often, but this gives you the ability to get notification when we post new videos. We're going to do this every 2 weeks. So you'll be able to come and ask your questions. I'll answer any questions. And if I don't know the answer, I'll make it up and look very certain about it. No, I won't. I have yet to have a question, except for Canada. I don't think I had any questions that I didn't know tonight, but this is good for me too. It keeps my brain going and helps me. So thank you for watching. Wait, there's one more. What do you think about the date September 16, 2023? Older drone with remote ID modules or grounded without remote ID modules? Yes. Well, they're grounded on paper. Yes. Get a module. If you have an older drone, put it on top of it, and then you'll be compliant. Hopefully, modules come down in price. Like I said, we'll be talking more about this over the next couple months before September 16. So we'll have plenty of options. I would not stress over remote ID at this stage. So, all right, that's it. I'm going to shut it down. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you, well, tomorrow. Watch the channel tomorrow. We have some, we have a cool video hopefully coming out. I think we're going to stay late too. All right.